So in today's crime documentary, here we have a missing girl found in the most unexpected way. Let's check it out.
After being burned by love, Brady Ostrike decided that he would look for a different kind of relationship. And online, he found just that. Unfortunately for those who took their virtual interactions with him offline, Brady would no longer refrain from acting on his long-standing and deeply deranged desires. It was only after a police chase and car crash, when a black suitcase in his trunk unzipped, that Brady's many heinous crimes would come tumbling out. But most shockingly, one of the most incriminating pieces of evidence came from a security camera that Brady put up himself. Meet Brady. He may look like he's undertaking some normal home improvement work, but Brady's upgrade served a different purpose. As a professional electrician, Brady was more than capable of house maintenance. It wasn't, however, a repair that the 31-year-old was working on when his face was captured by one of the many cameras he had personally installed in his Wyoming, Michigan home. Instead, that camera, the one he put up, caught the image of Brady in the midst of an incriminating act. The first footage was recorded on July 5, 2014, of a casually dressed Brady wearing what appears to be a tank top and boxers. As he scratches himself, he appears to be thinking of how to approach his task. Then he gets to work, cleaning up what seems to be a rather untidy space. The area is cleared before our eyes with a kind of newly installed type of pulley system, something Brady brushes past. Then it's back to more scratching. Only this time, Brady is dressed and looks ready to head out. Just what Brady was readying those subterranean rooms for wouldn't be discovered until almost 2 weeks later. It was at that time when he would be described as pure evil from start to finish by the Wyoming police chief that the very cameras that had captured Brady's prep work would reveal the abhorrent purpose of his overhauling effort. Getting to know Brady isn't easy. Brady's was a sheltered childhood, with his mother homeschooling in between brief stints at small private schools. Established early in his life, therefore, was a social network that centered on the church. In fact, it would be through the church that Brady would meet women. Gaining an understanding of Brady's personality is even more difficult, as the dichotomy is clear. Despite plenty of documentation to the contrary, there are individuals who held positive opinions of him, and who continue to wrestle with the thought of Brady perpetrating his many appalling crimes. To his family members and close friends, Brady was extremely generous. The consensus is that he always longed for marriage and children. To his co-workers and those who had the misfortune of crossing his cyber path, Brady was strange and sinister. Described as not a very clean guy and somewhat unkempt with an ever-present and pungent body odor. His roommates even reported that at some point Brady had taken to urinating in bottles he left all over the house. He caused unease, with one person admitting that Brady freaked him out, and another going so far as to describe him as having crazy eyes.
I think we could tell he was pretty unclean by the constant, scratching everywhere in the beginning led us to believe what type of hygiene he had. But other than that, it got sort of a normal homeschool, raised around the church. Like, that makes you second guess, okay, am I doing the right thing? Having my kids homeschooled or raising them in a church?
If you were to ask his apprentice on the job, however, this standoffishness wasn't altogether a bad thing. This is because when Brady did open up to others, he described his inappropriate intimate experiences and detailed his perverse proclivities. Yet had there been any uncertainty as to Brady's inner nature, his brutality during 5 days in July of 2014 would put that doubt to rest. It was, in fact, within a single intimate relationship that Brady's intenseness was encapsulated. This romantic partnership would also set the stage for what would happen when Brady's severe nature was no longer restricted. It was in 2001 when 19-year-old Brady was attending the Montana Wilderness School of the Bible in Augusta, Montana, that he first met Tina. He was almost immediately all in, thus establishing a pattern in his personal relationships that would continue. Although Tina lived in Canada, Brady proposed marriage to Tina. And during their 7-year engagement, he and Tina seemed to beat the odds, namely the distance between them. Of course, ensuring that they remained connected required money, a lot of money, and it was Brady's money to be exact. It's unknown precisely how much Brady claimed to have paid for Tina's many trips to Michigan and the vacation spots they visited over the years, but the $30,000 diamond and sapphire engagement ring Brady presented to her might offer some indication of his investment, financial at least, in Tina and the life they would share. Not that Tina didn't cherish this item of jewelry. In fact, she liked it so much she allegedly refused to return it when she called off the engagement. This she'd done just a few.
Oh, hold up. Wait a minute. That was 30,000, bro. What do you mean? What do you mean you're not returning that? That could have been the thing that might have sent him over the edge. I know it had me a little upset. 30,000, bro? Whew.
Weeks before the wedding, and after the invitations had already gone out. Following this, Brady claimed to anyone willing to listen that Tina had allegedly emptied his bank accounts and cleared out the 401k he'd given her access to. And Tina had done all this while he was at work. Although Tina would later claim that the breakup was mutual, saying that they, quote, wanted to end it before we were 5 years down the road and getting a divorce, those close to Brady suggested otherwise. Tina dumped Brady, blindsiding him, they assert. What is almost certain is that everyone would, after the heinous events, agree with Tina's claim that apparently this last year, after the breakup, Brady had made some bad choices, which is certainly one way to put it. Brady had long been someone who seemed at risk of personal collapse. After chopping down a tree that had formerly blocked Brady's view of his neighbor's bedroom from his own, for instance, he'd become enraged when he believed the neighbor family was being too loud. Brady proceeded to shoot 2 rounds into the ground. Even on a more basic and less overtly confrontational level, he struggled with his social skills. His penchant for squeezing too hard when shaking hands had caused his roommate's father to warn that Brady was going to hurt someone the way he greeted people. In another incident, while hosting Bible study at his house, as Brady and his 2 roommates would host Bible study meetings, Brady had been showing off a firearm he owned when he accidentally fired it. The bullet went through the kitchen wall and entered the hood of his roommate's car, which was parked outside. Brady had run outside.
I don't know if we gonna pray after that, bro. I'm there for Bible study and you let off a round through your kitchen wall. Yeah, it's time for me to go, fam. It's time for me to go. Now I'm seeing why she ran. She was probably in fear for her life, bro. Like what? Yeah, all of these are definitely signs.
And pushed the damaged car into the garage before turning off the house lights and hoping police didn't show up. And they didn't. It was instead a neighbor who'd heard the shot and approached Brady. And for at least the second time in his life, Brady was warned that he was going to hurt someone if he wasn't more careful. And it would soon come true. After word of Brady accidentally firing the gun inside the house in front of the children made the rounds, parents stopped sending their kids to Bible study with Brady. However, his roommates were even more freaked out because when they asked Brady what he would have done if he'd accidentally shot him or Nick, and law enforcement had shown up, Brady explained that he would have shot the other one and told law enforcement that he'd been forced to use his weapon on them when they had both gone crazy. These roommates soon became former roommates, understandably. His behavior following the end of the engagement established some disturbing notions that seemed to have emerged in Brady's mind. Brady spent much of his time online, with his roommates saying his free time was spent in front of the downstairs computer, and even his reality was augmented with role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. Brady would also take part in LARPing, which is role-playing while physically portraying characters. Along with groups of children and adults, he was said to engage in mock battles and sword fights. He also had an affinity for truly terrible poetry and was obsessed with medieval weaponry, which was displayed prominently throughout his home. Brady was clearly a man for whom the make-believe meant much, and very little stretching of the imagination was required of him to render this virtual existence into reality. He slipped effortlessly into a fantasy life, but Brady's fall would be steep, and the fantasy world in which he landed was not one he could easily wrench himself from, had he even bothered to try. It was while at a bar one evening in the early summer of 2014 that Brady actually shared some of his dark inner thoughts. While inebriated, Brady spoke to the bar manager, who found the whole situation to be suspicious. That's because Brady wasn't just talking. In fact, he told the manager that he was acting out his warped thinking. According to Trey, the bar manager, Brady had walked into the premises close to 6 p.m. Then, over a beer, he'd started to talk about women. After explaining to Trey how Tina had left him and allegedly taken his money, Brady went on to say that all women are crazy. Brady couldn't understand why, according to Trey, they didn't want to be treated well. So what he had decided, thanks to a newfound clarity fueled by heartache and bitterness, was that he was done with women like Tina, who didn't want to be treated nicely. Brady had decided that he would seek out women who wanted to be mistreated. And just where would Brady find this type of woman? Why, Craigslist, of course. Between 2011 and 2014, the platform was receiving a lot of media attention for the adult services offered, and because several convicted murderers had used it to lure their victims. So when Brady confessed over a beer at Mulligan's bar how he was now only looking for women who wanted to be mistreated, he shared one additional disturbing detail. This item of interest was in fact so significant that it alone formed Trey's justification for calling the police after Brady left the venue.
Why is there always somewhere you can go for your sick, twisted fantasy? The whole time he was explaining, I'm thinking of the internet, trying to rack my brain to figure out, okay, he gonna find somewhere to find this type of sick fantasy interest online. Like in a lot of documentaries, you hear people saying, I want to do this to someone and do something. And I found this group of people that would let me do it or were like-minded. Like, why is that always the case?
You see, Brady told him that he'd found a new woman already. And in fact, she just so happened to be locked up in his basement at that very moment. After Trey pulled Brady's information from his credit card, police made a welfare check at the Taft Avenue home where Brady lived. When they encountered Brady and advised him that someone at Mulligan's had overheard his conversation about a woman being imprisoned in his basement, Brady laughed and invited the officers inside. In the basement, he said they would be able to see for themselves that the young woman in question was safe. And when police officers were able to determine that the woman, by the name of Melissa, was of age and in fact unharmed, they thanked Brady for being so cooperative and left the house. But this wasn't the full story, and this wasn't the last time the police would see Melissa. Melissa also wouldn't be the last woman Brady met on Craigslist. She would, however, be the last one to survive. Their relationship started off somewhat rocky, with Melissa in a suitcase in the backseat of his car. Melissa had recently moved back home to Michigan after living in New York for some time. Looking to meet people and perhaps find a friends with benefits type relationship, Melissa had placed an ad in Craigslist. Within the hour, Brady responded. It didn't take long for them to move their conversation off Craigslist. Melissa would tell Brady that she was living with friends in the nearby city of Coldwater. He offered for Melissa to move in with him. He also suggested that he would be able to come and pick her up personally from Coldwater. Before leaving to get her in mid-May, Brady had asked Melissa if it would be okay with her to travel back to Wyoming in a suitcase. Assuming that this was a fetish of some sort, Melissa had agreed. Although she considered the request somewhat strange, which is perhaps the understatement of the century, when Brady had shown up with a black suitcase, she freely climbed inside. After being placed in the backseat of Brady's yellow Chevy Cobalt, the two had traveled for approximately 2 hours until, without warning, Brady stopped the car and unzipped the suitcase, only to spray an unknown substance into it and all over Melissa. When she came to, Melissa was still inside the suitcase, which was now located in Brady's garage. What happened next to a still groggy Melissa remained somewhat blurry thanks to the unknown substance sprayed on her, which Melissa would later believe to be computer cleaner. After presenting her with a slave contract, the terms and conditions, Melissa agreed and Brady proceeded to walk her around the house. When they entered the basement, where there were 2 small rooms on the left side of the stairs, joined by the bathroom with the furnace room on the right, things took a turn for the worse. Brady suddenly holding a gun to Melissa's head while locking a heavy metal chain around her neck. During the next 8 or so weeks,
See, now that pulley system from the beginning of the video is starting to be clear and make a lot of sense as to why it's in his house now. I was wondering who would just have a random pulley system. Now it makes sense.
the multiple brutal assaults on Melissa would be interrupted only by Brady's rotating work schedule, which allowed for the house cleaning contingency and the master-slave contract to be fulfilled. Scattered throughout her time in the torture chamber were outside visits. Melissa had even gone to the Golden Corral and met Brady's parents, and Brady had announced to co-workers that he was going to marry Melissa after knowing her for mere weeks. Their relationship is murky at best, with moments where Melissa consented to certain aspects, such as the night the bartender called the police after talking to Brady. At that time, when police found her in Brady's basement, they determined that she was unharmed and currently consenting, but that wouldn't remain the case for long. Although Melissa attributed much of Brady's behavior to their agreement, the violence was very much real. So too were the nights Melissa spent asleep in the dog cage, as was Brady's ultimate fantasy of using the taser on her. Although she never watched any of the footage, Melissa also believed the cameras to be constantly recording. In the early afternoon of June 19, 2014, however, reality would come knocking at Brady's Taft Avenue residence. He wouldn't be home to hear it, as Melissa had waited for him to leave for work before she called the ambulance. She would be taken to the Metro Hospital ER, and it was there that the Wyoming police officer would discuss with her what had transpired with Brady. According to Melissa, on the morning before she called for an ambulance, Brady had discovered that she'd been in contact with her ex-boyfriend. Upon this discovery, Brady had twisted her nose and punched her in the face, splitting her lip. When the officer asked if such an incident had ever happened before, Melissa shared that the assault wasn't Brady's first. Several days earlier, Brady had read her text messages and come across one that mentioned leaving him. Brady's immediate threat to Melissa after a brutal beating was that he would chain her up in the basement. 4 days after she broke free from the basement for a safe house, Brady reported Melissa to the police for allegedly stealing his property while he was at work. Like Tina, and according to Brady, Melissa had robbed him, and she also apparently left him while he was at work. Melissa, on the other hand, reported the assault, but requested that no criminal charges were filed against Brady, for reasons that aren't entirely clear. If that horrified you, Brady was really only getting started. On July 12th, less than a month after Melissa escaped, Brady once again turned to Craigslist, where he found the following post. "I need $50 by 3:30 p.m. today. I can pay you back later tonight, but I need gas and some mess quick. Everyone has bronchitis at my house and I don't want to get sick. I'm 8 months pregnant and my lungs are all squished as is. If you could help me out, me and my daughter will greatly appreciate it. Well, we're looking for donations if possible. Kinda in a tight spot and we have a baby on the way. As far as the fund goes, there won't be any male-on-male action or redacted on me unless it's my boyfriend. Condoms are necessary and I'm 18, he's 25. I recently dyed my hair so it's not black or brown anymore." Brady responded and an exchange began. "I can swing $120. Wow, really? Can you host?" "I can host. What are you thinking? I'm 25. Yes, you both need a ride. Where you want me to pick you up at?" "No, we can travel, just can't host is all. Where would you like to meet up?" "I'd like to redact it outside in a park around 11:30. That okay? Can you make it?" I don't know. I don't want to get in trouble for indecent exposure or anything. I can't go to jail being 8 months pregnant. It's cop-free. It's a park, but behind it are a lot of woods. No cops at all. Not my first time there. I can redacted you as you redacted your boyfriend. Okay, do we need to bring the condoms? No, I've got a rubber for me. Go in past the baseball diamonds to the grass lot in the back. Follow the trail to the right till you get to the meadow. I have a dry blanket for us 3. Okay, I guess we can. Sorry for the late reply. We had to talk about it and your messages kept getting sent to the spam box. What time? Midnight. Sounds great. If I give an extra 40, can I bear back? Okay, will do. Thanks for the donation. We may be a tad bit late because the boyfriend is stinking up the bathroom at the moment.
Why is Craigslist still up? Somebody please tell me. What good is it doing? I need to hear some good. I need to hear some good examples of it saving lives or something. Other than that, why is Craigslist still up to be able to do something like this?
When he gets out, we'll be on our way. In an exclusive interview with EWU, 18-year-old Brooke Ann Slocum was described by her mother, Deb Hotchkiss.
She was the sweetest girl ever. She would help anybody out, anybody. She would help them out. She loved her family. She was a beautiful soul, beautiful soul. She just got tied up in something evil.
Brooke Slocum was known to show kindness toward others in difficult situations. Bothered by the homelessness plaguing Grand Rapids, Brooke, who herself didn't have a fixed address, would hold up a sign asking for aid, only to turn over the cash to someone else so that they could get off the street for a night. Brooke was already slim and worried about her next meal, yet she would pack lunches for the hungry. A natural nurturer, Brooke wanted nothing more than to find love and make a family of her own. She was 8 months pregnant in July of 2014, carrying a very wanted little girl who she planned to name Audie. It is, however, difficult to determine whether Brooke believed that what she was experiencing with her boyfriend Charlie Oppenheer was in fact love. From the outside, it certainly doesn't appear to have been the case. Deb recalls meeting Charlie and her feelings about the relationship between him and her daughter.
The first time I met him, I was very uneasy. Didn't have very good feelings. A lot of times I would call her. She wouldn't call me back. He was controlling of her, and he always had to be with her when she came to visit me. So at that point, I knew it was not a healthy relationship.
25-year-old Charlie and 18-year-old Brooke's relationship was turbulent. While Charlie was the father of baby Audie, he already had 2 children and an on-and-off relationship with their mother, Rose. During the times when he wasn't living with Brooke, and even while Brooke was trying to win him back, Charlie had continued to be intimate with Rose. After a year and a half of Brooke being with Charlie, meaning they'd gotten together when Brooke was still a minor, Charlie discovered that Brooke was pregnant.
She wanted Audie so bad, so bad. She needed her in her life.
He'd reportedly told Rose that he planned to end the relationship with Brooke. But apparently feeling sorry for Brooke, Rose had allowed her and Charlie, whom she'd twice previously filed domestic violence charges against, to move into her house. A pregnant Brooke and Charlie were now living with Charlie's ex-partner and the mother of his 2 young children in her home. The sleeping arrangement? Brooke was on the couch, while Charlie slept in the bed with Rose. Eventually, though, Brooke would be kicked out, with Charlie following shortly thereafter. In July of 2014, Charlie's life was perhaps on the upswing. He was back working after being furloughed for a lengthy period, and by all accounts was doing well on the job. He'd even recently purchased a new to him, dark green 1995 Saab. It was, in fact, contact from police about the Saab that had alerted his father, Gerard Jerry Charles Oppenheer, to the fact that something was amiss with his son. When he received a phone call from an officer on July 13, 2014, to ask him if a green Saab found at the Gazan water tower was registered to Charlie, Jerry had tried to reach his son. Always prompt to respond via phone or text, this time Charlie neither called nor texted his father in return. Another 3 days passed. Charlie was still radio silent, and despite being checked on several times by authorities, the Saab hadn't left its grassy parking spot in Gazan Park. That was when Jerry walked into the Wyoming Police Department to report his son missing. Unbeknownst to Jerry, while at the police station's desk window, detectives in the back were being called out to Gazan Park. A body had just been found near the trailhead. The officer who was back at the park to check again on the seemingly abandoned sob had walked the trail and noticed a used condom wrapper, and several smoked cigarettes. There was also a pool of blood resting atop a mud puddle. A discarded and upside-down brown flip-flop was located nearby. Concealed underneath some dead tree limbs was Charlie's body. There was an unnatural appearance to the positioning of the sticks, rendered only more macabre for officers on the scene by the human arms sticking out, as if attempting to escape from the makeshift funeral pyre. Flies were collecting near the puddle. The faint odor of decay hung in the still, humid air. Yet Jerry wouldn't be told that his son had been located. Charlie's identity first needed to be confirmed, and this was going to be more difficult without a head, as Charlie had been decapitated and his head was missing. Also missing, 8 months pregnant Brooke.
The cops came to my house and told me she was missing.
Okay.
It took them 3 days to contact me after Charles was murdered. But they came to my house, and my other daughter was here, and she called me and she told me Brooke was missing. So I flew home from work, and they told me where Charlie was at when he was murdered. And me and my husband and a few friends flew to Grand Rapids and started searching the woods. The police told me that there was no need for us to go there. They already combed the area. But as a mom, you got to double check. And hopefully you could find something. But we did not end up finding her there.
In the very early hours of July 13, 2014, hours after Brady O'Strike had made an arrangement.
So I'm guessing he killed him and probably took her home to torture her or whatever. Yo, this dude is sick. Sick. And it's people like that out there. That is sick, fam. Oh, this whole thing is crazy.
Arrangement to meet someone on Craigslist at midnight. An on-duty officer pulled into a mobile gas station. While there, he'd observed a white SUV driving past, but then noticed that the vehicle circled around and stopped across from him. When the occupants reached the officer, they informed him of a suspicious situation that had occurred at the park. While parked and sitting in the back seat, the teen's attention was drawn to a man in a white mask peering into the vehicle. They were so scared of this masked stranger, in fact, that the driver jumped into the front seat and sped away. The last thing he remembered seeing was the murky figure heading toward a dark car parked in the back of the lot. By the time Charlie's father reported his son missing, police had already started checking local hotels for him and Brooke, but that same day, Charlie's decapitated body was located. It was information gleaned from phone and computer records that led to the emergence of Brady O'Strike as a suspect. Officers soon began conducting surveillance on Brady's house, and since they weren't entirely sure if he was involved in Charlie's death or Brooke's disappearance, they waited for him or his Chevy Cobalt to move. But they didn't have to wait long. In the evening of July 16th, just after police started watching the house, they witnessed Brady backing the car out of the driveway. Officers followed him, and a high-risk traffic stop was conducted, and Brady was pulled over. Though he initially responded to officers' verbal instructions, at one point Brady started to reach over to the passenger seat. Despite being ordered to halt this movement, he slammed his door shut and barreled away. A brief chase ensued, but when Brady approached 131 to turn north, he appeared to lose control of his vehicle and crashed head-on into the guardrail. An even more brief standoff took place. Then, a gunshot resounded. During the siege, several officers left the scene of the crash and proceeded to start what would become a multi-day search of Brady's home. The items located inside the house were not much different than those found in the badly damaged car, which was being combed through while Brady's body lay beside it, underneath a yellow covering, only his boots visible. Multiple tasers, knives, ammunition, plastic tarp, and a collapsible shovel were, perhaps unsurprisingly, found inside the Cobalt. Also located, which perhaps solved at least one mystery, was a white mask, the same one Brady wore when he first approached and frightened the teenagers, and then headed over to Charlie Oppenier's green Saab. When officers opened the trunk right there on the moonlit road, they were greeted with the sight of a black suitcase. Inside that suitcase was the body of an unclothed Brooke, in the fetal position as if to protect her precious Audi. Though it was, of course, too late. Brooke's cause of death was ligature strangulation. A baby pink blanket was used to cover Brooke and her deceased daughter in the suitcase. But it was the footage found on the cameras located throughout Brady's basement that truly disturbed officers. Although the video recordings would answer the almost unspeakable question of just what had happened to Brooke during the intervening days from when Charlie's body was found to when hers was discovered in Brady's trunk, the answer would be more horrifying than anyone could have predicted. As a mother knows, Deb was aware that what would come out in a trial would only devastate her further. And as a grandmother-to-be who had a nursery prepared and waiting for the imminent arrival of baby Audie, that's saying a lot.
10:30, 11, it was at nighttime that the cops came and told me that she had died. And I asked them if my granddaughter was alive, and they said no.
Making abundant use of the torture setup he'd casually prepared, Brady assaulted and tortured Brooke multiple times over the 5 days he held her prisoner. He forced her to smoke marijuana and put a chain around her neck. Her arms were attached to the pulley system that Brady was seen installing in earlier footage. Despite there being no sound in the footage captured by Brady's own cameras, Brooke's expressions communicate her distress. The tears shed were silent yet resonant. Brady later strangled her to death. As Charlie's skull was found in March of 2019 on a remote farm about 30 minutes north of Gazan Park, confirming his cause of death to be from a gunshot to the head, there remained just one baffling element to the entire sickening affair. The search warrant on Brady's house was literally being executed as his body arrived at the morgue. Detectives found many, and we do mean many, items of evidence. Listed are handguns and rifles, knives and swords, a machete, throwing knives, one long-handled hatchet. There are whips and chains, ropes and handcuffs, a taser, metal collars and restraints, even a shock prod. Add to these the assorted adult toys and condoms and unmarked bottles of pills found scattered throughout the basement, a human molar, Velcro skull mask, black Hannibal mask, and a dirty baby doll with a fixed noose. Women's lingerie, clothing, and jewelry. Also located was a map affixed to a basement wall. The U.S. map, if possible, dwarfed even the most obscure and bizarre items taken into evidence. On the map, all over it in fact, were different colored pushpins clearly intended to denote something. With Brady no longer able to offer any insight as to the apparently single, clean, and organized item in the home, it would be Melissa, his survivor, who would provide detectives with the answer Brady had given her. The pins, according to Brady, represented locations where he'd stashed food and weapons in advance of the apocalypse. Why this kind of planning and kits were necessary is likely to never be known. When news broke about the true horror of what Brady did, his former fiancée Tina spoke publicly to say that she was shocked. "The guy I know and the guy who did this are two different people." She claims she wants to remember Brady as the man she knew and not the monster he apparently became, saying, quote, "He was my teddy bear. He had mood swings, but who doesn't?" We wanted Deb, Brooke's mom, to have the last word on this tragic case.
I was glad that he took himself out, because I don't know if I would have been able to sit in a courtroom. I seen enough pictures through the cops, through the information that they had, that it was just sickening. I got so much support from my community, from Saranac, from all over the state of Michigan, from all over the United States. And even across the world, I had people texting me, messaging me, sending me cards in the mail. It was just overwhelming, but a blessing at the same time. And every now and then, somebody will send me a letter or a card in the mail. Overwhelmed, I'm blessed, I'm grateful that they still think about Brooke and think about me, even though it was so very tragic ending. But there are a lot of good people in this world, and there's a lot of bad people in this world.
As a parting question for Deb, we asked her how she keeps Brooke and Audie's memory with her.
They're in my house, they're in my heart. I talk about them a lot to my family and friends. I keep her still going in my life.
We want to extend the utmost gratitude to Deb for speaking with us.